Take 14. I'm going to talk about Hobbes. This is his book, Leviathan. If you want to pick it up yourself, keep a few things in mind. There are some written in modern English and some written in the English of his time. In his time, there was no such thing as standardized English spelling. So, he's going to spell the same word 3 different ways in the same paragraph. But anyway, this video will be separated into 3 sections. His state of nature, a thought experiment, and the conclusion, wrapping it all together. So, Hobbes' state of nature. Unlike what most people believe, Hobbes didn't actually think that people were inherently evil, but rather it's our situation which determines sort of how we act. And we are primarily motivated by self-interest. Not only motivated, but just primarily. So in a state of nature, the situation is, in order to survive, you may have to preemptively kill other people and take their stuff before they kill you and take your stuff. So it's not that people in the state of nature just love killing and stealing. It's just that you have to do bad things to survive in that environment. I think kind of like Game of Thrones, when things start getting chaotic. Like the whole speech the Hound gives to Arya about the Starks getting beheaded because they weren't willing to do bad things. It's kind of like that. And one of the problems with this is that you can't enforce any agreement. So if everyone in an area were able to agree to a set of rules and then follow them, then they'd be able to be good. But if there's no way to enforce the agreement in an area, it only takes one person breaking the agreement for everyone to start breaking it, and then they return to the state of nature almost immediately. This is why Hobbes believed that you had to install a dictator. Someone who had final decision on everything and could not be questioned in order to ensure order. He knew about other ideas. In fact, during his time there was a Republican movement. The Republicans were a group of people who wanted to overthrow the monarchy and establish a democracy, or a democratic republic. That back then, Republican just meant against monarchy. But he believed that any kind of democracy or non-dictatorial system would either turn into dictatorship eventually anyway, or return to the state of nature, and then from the state of nature still end up with a dictatorship. So he thought that monarchy was, because his thought was that if there was any conflict over what to do, everything will just collapse. So there has to be someone who is just right all the time, is considered right all the time, even if it seems ridiculous what he's doing or saying. But anyway, yes, the carrot and the stick. The carrot of this system is that you're safe in your property and persons. And the stick is that if you don't follow along with the sovereign's rules, he punishes you, like puts you in jail and kills you and stuff. So there's that. Now the thought experiment is this, and before I continue, a thought experiment is very important because there's certain things that you just can't test, like physically. Like you can't look at a principle or an idea under a microscope. You have to, in order to test an abstract thing, you got to put it through an abstract experimentation. And that is how thought experiments work. And that's why they're very important. That's why philosophy does them all the time. And another thing about thought experiments, if you don't know them very well, you can never question the premises. Because the idea of a thought experiment is to come up with a stress test situation, a situation in which it is the most difficult for the principle to be the case. So challenging the premises, i.e. challenging the setup, misses the whole point. Like the idea is not to find like a friendly area for this principle to be applied, it's to find a difficult one. Or just to show what this would look like in practice. So anyway, the thought experiment is the prisoner's dilemma. It goes like this. Imagine you are and someone else have been arrested. You've both been accused of being spies against the government. And it's something like this. If you both confess, you get 2 years. If neither of you confess, you both get 1 year. If you confess, but the other guy doesn't, you go free and they get 3 years. If they confess and you don't, you get 3 years and they go free. Some of you are very clever, might have already figured out how this completely relates to Hobbes. But it's like this. If you're unable to make an agreement with the other person, you should confess. You will get the least amount of years. Although the best situation is for neither of you to confess, so that you both get 1 year, the least amount of years total. It's only 2 years added up. Even though the best case scenario would be for you to confess and the other person not to. The thing is, if you go to the other person and say, I won't confess if you don't, they're going to confess so that they go free and you get 3 years. Because there's no way to enforce this agreement. So, if you're both rational actors, you will both confess and you will both get 2 years. But, if there was... The carrot, of course, is that you both get 1 year, which is what's best for both of you. If there was a stick, if there was some way to enforce an agreement, to enforce the idea that I will not confess if you don't confess, then you could both not confess and get the better deal, which is that neither one of you get more than 1 year. You both get 1 year. The idea here is that governments like that. You need some way to enforce an agreement, and if you don't have a way to enforce an agreement, people will be jerks and they will confess, and you'll both get 2 years. But if you have rules and a way to enforce those rules, then you can make the agreement, I will not confess if you don't, and if you confess, this other guy will, I don't know, beat you at the club or something. So, there's an enforcement mechanism. So there are actually many ways to interpret and many uses for the personage dilemma, but in terms of showing kind of the Hobbesian state of nature and his argument for the existence of a state or some kind of enforcement agency when it comes to agreements, that's what it looks like applied. If there is no way to enforce agreements, you're not going to get the best situation for everyone, or for most people. You will not get the most utility maximizing thingy situation outcome. But if you can enforce agreements, you can get a better deal for everyone. And that's my dog. He's doing his thing. But anyway, that's the video.